is not living up to the spirit of the deal.
This Iran deal is a total farce. The only people defending it are doing it not to defend the deal. They're doing it to defend Obama.
We cannot and will not make this certification.
We've moved from appeasement to Iran for the last 8 years to confrontation.
Brand new details in the Harvey Weinstein scandal. He's now facing removal from the prestigious Academy Board.
It's amazing the hypocrisy of Hollywood and the liberal elites. They refuse to acknowledge that they have been, part of the problem.
It's going to be time to negotiate health care that's going to be good for everybody.
Okay, Chuck and Nancy, the ball's in your court.
President Trump called it a renaissance for conservative values during a passionate address.
In America, we don't worship government, we worship God.
Nobody's going to catch him. It's an easy touchdown for Syracuse. Into the end zone. Touchdown, Syracuse.
Is good at football, meaning a very happy wife for yours truly, even though my wife, who went to Syracuse, probably can't name one person on the team.
In other words, you just care about your happiness.
It's all about
Welcome
me.
to Todd Pyro, David. Let me introduce you.
But for those of you who don't know, Syracuse beat Clemson. Very unexpected because Syracuse, they're sort of an okay football team. Clemson, they won a national championship last year, so congrats.
All right, just rub
Syracuse.
it in. David and I are moping over here. None of our teams are doing very well.
Exactly. No, ours are just kind of.
But we're happy to be alive, David. And
I have cousins from Syracuse, so they went to Orange Men country.
Before you start thinking I have like the football gods in my corner, Dave and I are both Giants fans, so it's not been a great season for the two of us.
We're not worried about Super Bowl.
Hey, but you're with us today,
and we're
happy to have you on the couch.
Absolutely.
David Webb, everybody. We've got a lot of news to get to.
Let's get to it.
A big show still ahead.
President Trump announcing he will not certify the Iran nuclear deal.
But the president stopping short of scrapping the deal altogether.
Kevin Corke live in Washington, D.C. on what this means. Kevin, how are you? Let's take three.
Hey, I'm doing well, guys. And by the way, you Giants fans out there, beware the Broncos. I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay, so now what? We've talked a lot about the Iran nuclear deal. Congress, the ball is in your court. You have 60 days to refine the approach to the JCPOA, and then they have to sell it to the White House. Because, again, barring some sort of a breakthrough, the president could still pull the U.S. out of the agreement. Simply speaking, tick-tock, Congress, tick-tock.
In the event we are not able to reach a solution working with Congress and our allies, then the agreement will be terminated. It is under continuous review, and our participation can be canceled by me as president at any time.
Key word there, continuous review. That means they're going to be looking at this very carefully. All right, very quickly, here's a possible fix by some congressional lawmakers, Messrs. Corker, Cotton, and Rubio. Snap back if Iran goes under the one-year breakout. Restrictions should remain indefinitely. Build up the IAEA's verification powers and limit Iran's centrifuge program. Don't forget, there also major news out of Washington, the president declaring Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard a terrorist organization. That means sanctions by Treasury, and that could cut off part of their lifeblood. Guys, back to you.
All right, we'll see where all
thank you,
this goes.
Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.
Let's get right to the point on this deal. It is a bad deal. It has been a bad deal. Bernie Sanders was tweeting, why we're not complying with this deal. This is a guy who should pay more attention to his wife, Jane, who knows how a bad deal turns out. The American people get it. You don't make a bad deal with terrorists who say death to America in a terrorist regime. Really important, the president separates the people from the government. Khamenei's been there for, 28 years. They've been in power. They oppress their people. Americans get that. This is a bad deal. The world is not safer. And proliferation and the money that we gave them and the pallets of money, that all says it was a failure from the start.
He's also not pulling this deal altogether just yet. He's saying, Congress, do your job. We have got to be stronger when it comes to Iran, the biggest sponsors of terror in the world. You would think if you take a step back, regardless of being Republican or Democrat, isn't that what everybody should want? But not to anyone's surprise, Nancy Pelosi is up in arms about
this. The very
this.
Democrats who claim to support Israel don't pay attention to Iran supporting Hamas and Hezbollah that attack Israel. They have 11,000 missiles of some sort pointed at Israel, whether it's rockets or otherwise.
That's a great point. So Nancy Pelosi and a number of folks in the media had their reaction yesterday. Here's some of that.
President Trump's refusal to recertify is a grave mistake that threatens America's security and our credibility at a very critical time. Iran remains in compliance with the nuclear agreement. If they did not, we would not be supporting certification.
This was an incredibly hawkish speech. It seems like the United States, the Trump administration, wants hostility.
The president has really set the United States against our closest allies when it comes to the Iran deal.
President Rouhani's position all week has been, look, if the U.S. decides not to abide by the terms of the deal on its end, that's just going to damage American credibility.
All right, so you clearly saw Nancy Pelosi speaking there. You saw a number of members of the media speaking. On these sorts of national security issues, I prefer to get my information and my analysis from individuals like you, from military individuals who've been on the front lines, who understand how diplomacy and military work together. And so when you speak with these individuals, many of them are in favor of what the president did, because looking at the kicking the can down the road mentality, the appeasement mentality, the president said it yesterday, when you avoid a problem, it gets worse.
Right, the problem doesn't go away, and an important part of this is if you withdraw from the battlefield, whatever that battlefield is, it be it the diplomatic battlefield, the actual battlefield, as Obama did, and hand it over, that doesn't mean your enemy withdraws from the battlefield. You're still engaged in a conflict. We are in a conflict with Iran. They have been in a conflict with the world. Their hegemonic views that I've been writing about for years and have been studying for years, it doesn't stop. They further their ideas and they proliferate around the world. They're a global threat. Can you imagine if they have a nuclear weapon? It's not just delivery, it's proliferation.
Right. And you know who this is good for? Are our allies. I mean, how often we forget. We had General Jack Keane on the show earlier, and it was a reminder of how often we forget about how important our relationships are to our allies around the world. You mentioned Israel as one of them.
Al-Sisi, Egypt's government. I had a recent conversation with one of their senior officials from Egypt.
Right.
They want security and certainty. Other countries, Jordan is weak militarily. They give us good intelligence. King Abdullah wants security.
Yeah. Abby mentioned it at the top of the show. A very busy news morning here. That's because yesterday was a very busy news day. Iran, topic number one. Healthcare, topic number two. And as you might imagine, the president at 8:07 here on the East Coast is already up and tweeting this morning.
Got him right here.
He tweets, health insurance stocks, which have gone through the roof during the Obamacare years, plunged yesterday after I ended their Dems windfall. Very proud of my executive order, which will allow greatly expanded access and far lower costs for health care. Millions of people benefit. So let's break this down for ultimately what it is. Those payments, which under the Obama administration were illegal, when you listen to individuals like Jonathan Turley explain it, court decision, right? They are subsidies for insurance companies. There's no two ways about it.
Right. They tried to prop up a failed system because the key to Obamacare was that you needed to have the people, the young people, buy to support the old. That's the funding mechanism. When that failed, they used the subsidies. The executive cannot do this. Congress, the House controls the money. The money is spent there. It's appropriated. By the way, factually correct. Because there's an appeal underway after the court decision, the Trump administration for a while had to continue the payments. Now we see action being taken on that. Insurance company stocks will rebound, by the way. Look at the investor side of that.
Well, as the president was saying, it's the insurance companies that have been making the money. What happened to the people that matter most?
It's going to their bottom line.
Right.
You have a profit margin and you account for dollars from subsidies, dollars from sales, dollars from whatever else.
Well, and here's what the president's doing that is different than Obamacare, that was shoved down everyone's throats and was just passed down partisan lines. I heard him yesterday. He said, I want to work with Democrats. I invite them to the White House. In fact, I will go see you. So Democrats are now in a box, because if they're actually open and honest about this, which Bill Clinton was on the campaign trail with his wife, they know that changes need to be made with health care. And so how do you go back to your constituents, you know, during the midterms a year from now and say, well, we didn't even come to the table. We didn't even have a conversation about how to fix Obamacare, how to fix the health care system in this country. Now it's a matter of them working together. The president, that is what he's campaigned on. I can get deals done.
He's opened the door and he said, come. For one moment, I do not believe, for any moment for that matter,
they will.
Democrats will come. But look, the president made promises on the campaign trail. Right. He's kept another promise, and this promise has a real-world effect. It's not keeping a promise for the sake of being a political, and he's not a political. though. He's a businessman. We're seeing a businessman president. The blue-collar billionaire gets it, and the American people see that.
A big day not only here at Fox and Friends Weekend, but also a big day in Hollywood for completely different reasons.
It's been a big week.
It has been, right.
In Hollywood.
Obviously, the unraveling of the Iran deal, the unraveling of Hollywood with Harvey Weinstein facing more and more accusations from a growing number of actresses. The big question today is, will A-listers decide to keep Weinstein in the Academy? You know, the folks that vote on the Oscars every year. Again, this seems like we're going into a little bit of inside baseball. Why would you care about this? Well, we want to focus on this because we really think this underlies the hypocrisy of the folks there in Hollywood. They're having a meeting today to determine whether this individual has been accused of many, many things, and in many
accused
instances,
of many things. There are 3 women that have come out accusing him of rape. David, you made a good point before we started the show.
Basic question. How many accusations of rape and actual undercover tapes do you need to have a meeting to remove Harvey Weinstein? You need a meeting for this?
Well, there's going to be a meeting. And what's so interesting, you remember a few years ago, Joe Paterno, the esteemed coach of Penn State University, with regard to the whole Jerry Sandusky scandal. He was run out of town on a rail. And for all intents and purposes, he was an older gentleman, yes, but that more or less killed him. We had a talk show host, Chris Plant, on the hypocrisy that exists between that situation and what's going on in Hollywood right now. Take a listen.
Remember a few years ago at Penn State, Joe Paterno and Jerry Sandusky. It was discovered that Jerry Sandusky was doing terrible things. It was suggested that Joe Paterno had been made aware of it years earlier.
Yes.
And that he didn't come out and speak clearly and in a loud voice about what he had heard in the way of murmurs. And it was declared that he was just as guilty as Jerry Sandusky. Now we hear a different set of circumstances, but the same fact pattern. Because of his party affiliation, Joe Paterno, a well-known conservative friend of George H.W. Bush, they lynched him. They crucified him because he didn't speak up. Now all these Hollywood people, we learned, didn't speak up in virtually identical circumstances, and they're heroes.
You've known about it for years.
I reiterate, does Hollywood really need a meeting to decide to toss Harvey Weinstein out of Hollywood or anything associated with it?
No.
Period.
If I were Whoopi Goldberg, I'd wake up and say, guys, no. Why? I'm not even going to go to this meeting. I think the answer is pretty clear here. Look, I think
what are the women that are going to go to this meeting saying, are some of those women victims? I'm just leaving the question on the table. Why does Hollywood need a meeting?
And they've known about this for years, guys. We've heard jokes. Seth MacFarlane with jokes. David Letterman with
Bernie
jokes.
Rock. I mean, it's on.
I think that the American people are frustrated, and we've been talking about this all morning with the hypocrisy of all of this. Why, as a society, the media, Hollywood, they're so quick to jump to conclusions, especially when it comes to President Trump, based off of reports with anonymous sources. And here this is, as you said, they've been sitting on it for years. A number of women have come out that are able to mention their name and who they are and what they've been through, and yet it has taken so long for so many people, even media outlets, to come out and report this. I think it's just a reminder to all of us, politics aside, no one should stand for any of this. It's disgusting.
This is criminal. It's predatory behavior. Coming up, first it was fake news. Now Jerry Falwell Jr. says President Trump should coin a new phrase for lawmakers blocking his agenda: fake Republicans. What does former Congressman Jason Chaffetz think about that? We're going to ask him next.
Plus, we are just 17 days away from that spooky, scary holiday known as Halloween. So what is the most popular candy in the country? The most popular candy in your state as well? Really interesting, guys. You're going to be excited to see what we find out. Answer may surprise you. That's all coming up when Fox and Friends Weekend continues. 17 minutes after the hour now on a Saturday morning, a warning to Republicans. Jerry Falwell Jr. defending President Trump, saying it's time to send a message to those obstructing his agenda. Take a listen.
I spoke to the president last week, and I told him he needs to coin a new term, fake Republicans, because that's what those people you just named are. They're not really Republicans. We don't really have a majority in the Senate, and I think that would be a good term for him to start using.
So why are some working against him instead of with him? Joining us now is Jason Chaffetz, Fox News contributor, former GOP Utah congressman, and former chair of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. Jason, as always, great to see you. First, I want to get your take on that term, fake Republicans. What do you think about that?
Look, I'm sure it's cute. I'm sure it's probably very effective, but it's a dangerous slope. I wouldn't necessarily encourage it. I mean,
I am frustrated that the Senate is not able to do what I would think that they would do and get Republicans to vote Republican. But when you start going around and tearing people apart like that, I think it's a very dangerous game. I mean, I remember at one point Ted Cruz, to take an absurd example, did not endorse Donald Trump at the Republican convention. Is he a fake Republican? No, I don't think so. I just think it's I think it's a very dangerous way to go.
It seems to me there's two paths to go down at this point for the Republican Party: further cannibalization of it or working together on policy. How does the Republican Party do the latter?
Well, it's a great point, because I like what Margaret Thatcher actually said. She said, you've got to go out and win the argument, then you'll go out and win the votes. And what we haven't been doing, particularly in the Senate, is where you're supposed to be the most deliberative body on the face of the planet. They don't even get to the point of having a debate. So you have good, thoughtful people like Rand Paul who aren't going to vote on the procedure to move forward on the health care bill. That was a procedural vote. All you wanted to do is be able to debate the bill, offer amendments.
Right.
So again, a good, thoughtful person, but you got to be able to have the actual debate and then win the argument.
I'm glad you brought up Rand Paul, because what Rand Paul did this week seemed to be sort of what I think the Republican Party needs. He was the only person out there who seemed to be talking about groups coming together on health care, these associations, things along those lines. And the president went along with that this week. Do you think we see more of that going forward, at least on health care, but specifically on taxes? Or do you think it's just going to be more of the same, and we're going to get to Christmas and the Congress is going to be stuck there because nothing got done?
Well, I think it was Will Rogers who had this saying. They said the opposite of progress is Congress. And look, the founders of our nation set it up to be a very difficult, arduous process. And as a conservative, I don't want legislation that just slides through, you know, time after time after time. Nevertheless, the Republicans have got to live up to what they promised to do: repeal and replace Obamacare, get tax reform done.
Right.
I'm worried that that's sliding back to just tax cuts. So, yeah, we better, you know, go out and build the coalitions and win the argument with the American people.
Jason Chaffetz, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Enjoy your Saturday. Still ahead, the mainstream media furiously attacking President Trump for his tweets, but are they really missing the real story about how he is transforming our nation? And new hypocrisy from, you guessed it, drumroll, Hillary Clinton, comparing the president to Harvey Weinstein, but claiming sex assault allegations against her husband are clearly in the past. David Clark fired up about that and much more.